This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today we have a very special show. I say it's special, as they are all special, but it's a little different. And today's show is about one of the biggthey wastes of money and life and human endeavors I've ever seen. And it's this retreat from Afghanistan. And as as some people know, I mean, some people are so stupid these days, they don't know what's going on. But in 1975, we did the same thing in a place called Vietnam. And I said something on one of my tweets, and somebody got very upset with me and going, Jesus Christ. Here we have what's going on in Afghanistan. I think basically the end of American democracy as I see it. But also I think about I don't know if it's millions, but the millions of people who have died, wounded, the trillions we have spent out there. And this Biden administration just pulls the plug on them. And as a U.S. Marine, you have no idea how much that hurts. One person, have you ever killed anybody? I said, I mean, what the hell do you think we do? What the hell do you think we do? Because there's people out there trying to kill us. Some snowflake got all upset saying I was using vulgar language. Oh my God. And meanwhile, millions of people will start to die now. Because once we pull out, anybody who supported the U.S. will be either murdered or put in what they call concentration camps to reorient you. And Biden doesn't even know how many people are out there. How many Americans are still out there, plus the people that supported us. Afghanistan, Kabul is a big place. I've never been there, but I've seen pictures. It's a big place. So the track down of people who supported America in a stupid war that we should really never have been in, but we can say the same thing about Vietnam. But what all this proves to us is that we don't learn from history. We just keep making the same mistakes because of one reason. War is profitable. We make a lot of money at war, weapons and all this. So today we have a very special show. It's a very good friend of mine. His name is Ryan. We cannot use his face. He is a Marine who's completed 11 combat deployments as an infantry Marine. And the reason we cannot use his face is because if you're good at what you do, you get promoted into other, let's say, divisions of the U.S. government. And so his face and identity and his real name cannot be used because after 11 combat deployments, he has a couple of people who don't like him. But what he's been doing is what we call covert or clandestine. So I'll just give you a hint. When I was leaving Vietnam in 1973, an agency called Air America, AKA the CIA, approached me and said, would you fly for us? And I said, the CIA? And they wanted me to fly, first of all, because I'm Asian, they wanted me to fly in Thailand, or secondly, in Angola. And so one of the reasons Ryan cannot say who he is or what he does is he got promoted to, let's say, another division of the U.S. government. Any comments, Kim?
Well, I'm just very thankful that Ryan is willing to come on this show. This is not typically our subject, but with the Rich Dad Radio Show, the one thing we want to do is, shed shed some light on the truth if all possible. And that's why Ryan's here, to really to give us some, he's boots on the ground. He's there. He knows what's going on more than 99.9% of the people on this planet. So I'm excited to have him on the show and to find out what really is happening that we are not being told.
One more thing about the Rich Dad Radio Show. We don't bring college professors on here talking about how the war should be fought. We actually, I was there in Vietnam, and Ryan, who was a lot younger than I am, was also there in the longest war of American history, which we just lost. One more thing you may not realize, Afghanistan is more than just Afghanistan. It symbolizes who controls the world. And as you know, China just joined forces with those guys in Afghanistan. So I hate to say this, and I don't mean to sound unpatriotic, but it's the end of the American empire. That's what it symbolizes to me. Because as Marines in Vietnam, we were doing our best to stop them, in the Far East, but we didn't do it. We lost Vietnam. So with that, I'm very glad Ryan is a friend of mine, personal friend. He has 11 combat deployments, and now he's been promoted to another division. Just like my friend Jim's Records was promoted to another division. And so Ryan's going to share what he knows about what's really going on in Afghanistan. So Ryan, Semper Fi, welcome to the program.
Semper Fi, Robert. Kim, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being on.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify, I've done 11 combat tours. 2 of those were as an infantry Marine, one to Fallujah, Iraq in 2006, and then down in Helmand, Afghanistan in 2011. All the other tours were in defense. I've done 5 or 6 to Afghanistan through Kabul and Mazar Sharif up north. So I have a good understanding of the Afghan people, worked with them at many levels, from the infantry soldier all the way up to senior defense leaders in various parts of the country. What's concerning to me most about what's going on, we all expected that this war was going to end and it was going to be a little ugly on the way out. But how poorly that's gone and how far they missed the mark on what was going to happen. It was very clear when the Taliban started their offensive, one, with the timing, how close they did it to our withdrawal date because we gave them a date, and 2, in the manner in which they did it and moving across the north, which, if you know anything about the history of Afghanistan, the northern sections have been the most anti-Taliban sections even since before we went in. They focused their offensive up north because they knew they would take the south with no problem. And if they could break the back of the resistance quickly, then there wouldn't be much to take left in the country. So they moved across the north, surrounded Mazar Sharif, which was a major city, and then started pushing from other areas in the country, taking Herat, and then pushing in the south, which has been their stronghold, Kandahar and Helmand province. The fact that they took Kabul in one day does not surprise me. I expected some sort of fight out of the Afghan military for Kabul, but I only expected that to last a day or 2 before they gave up. The fact that the president left the country, I understand why nobody was fighting after the president got in a helicopter and left the country.
I hate to say it, but, Ryan, it's like deja vu all over again. But you and I were talking earlier. I mean, we've been friends for years. We're hunting together in Europe. But you talked about the ghost battalions of the Afghan army. Can you explain that?
Yes, it's almost an open secret. So Afghan generals for years have inflated their numbers because we pay them by the individual in their battalion, company, division, whatever they have. So let's say they're supposed to have 20,000 soldiers, but they only have 10,000. They're going to collect the money from us for 20,000, and they're going to keep that, and they're going to bribe their senior leaders with that money for those ghost soldiers. When on paper, you see things in the news that says, well, the Afghan military outnumbered the Taliban 3-1. I don't believe that for a second.
It's all about.
So Ryan, the narrative here was, it won't be so bad because these Afghan troops are well trained and they're going to fight back and all of this. And obviously that did not happen. So what was the reality of the Afghan troops? What was the reality of where we stood when they started pulling out?
So the reality of the Afghan military is it almost wasn't a program to build a military. It was a jobs program. It was a way for the U.S. government to help the Afghan government give jobs to Afghans. So you weren't getting military type people. You weren't getting the cream of the crop. Even their Afghan special forces, they were decent, but that's, an average third world infantry battalion, nowhere near any sort of special forces capability. And that's how money was spread out to the Afghan people to prop up the government, was through the military. You can read the reports. There's several OIG agencies that operated in the area and putting out reports about, the millions they spent on women and trying to get women into the government and the military And they did audit and found out that 1% of the resources put towards women was actually being used by women.
What was OIG? What the definition?
Office of Inspector General. So it's your internal affairs. The DoD has it. Every branch of the military has it. There's all various types of, I think there is a special OIG for Afghanistan. They publish these reports. All these reports are available online, and you can read about where all the money was wasted and the recommendations. And nobody's been on the ground and worked with the Afghan troops really thought they were going to fight. The last time that I was in combat with them was back in 2011 and 2011, down in Helmand province. And we would go out and we'd get into firefights, and the Taliban's very good. They know how to fight. They engage us from as far as possible. Their weapon system, they draw the fight out. We didn't really have air support there at the time, so they knew that. We'd be hours long firefights. The Afghan guys would mostly just sit in the ditch, wouldn't even shoot back, would sit in the ditch behind us as we would maneuver. They would maneuver up with us, but they were no part of the fight, and nobody expected them to be part of the fight. And that's when we had, I don't know the exact troop numbers, but we were still pretty high in 2011 of U.S. troops in the country. So anything thereafter that, as 2012 was a drawdown, the ability to train the Afghan forces was diminished because you didn't have the U.S. personnel there to train them.
And you said, when we were in Italy together, you said something like basically a lot of the Afghan troops couldn't even get a job at McDonald's.
No, they had a huge rampant drug problem. Opium is widely available in Afghanistan, obviously. So these are your lower tier people that had no other options, that took a government job because they got paid and they didn't have to do much. And you can see that in the fighting, even before we withdrew. Any major Taliban attack, the Afghan military would typically flee their posts. And then they'd have to bring in more troops, typically what they called their special forces, to come back in and take a district center, take a police station, and then put those guys back in place. But those guys were never there to fight. They never wanted to fight.
While it's still fresh in everybody's minds, if you can look at some of the footage from Afghanistan, you'll see it in the eyes. The Taliban, in their eyes, want to fight. You can see it. I would be terrified of those guys. But you look at the Afghan guys, all they want to do is go to McDonald's and run. It is so sad what America does when we try to buy patriotism, we try to buy loyalty. And as somebody accused President Bush of it, they were trying to nation build. But people forget the history of it. The Taliban are a derivative of the Mujahideen who kicked the Russians out of their country. I think it's called the Parrot's Beak or something like that. The people that control that part of the world control the world. So now the Chinese have jumped in there. They're going, hey, buddies, we're going to give you everything you want. So naturally, the Taliban wants to fight. Am I correct on the Mujahideen or becoming Taliban?
Yes and no. So splinter forces, yes, part of them are Taliban. Like we talked about up north, you had the Northern Alliance. Those guys fought on our side. Those guys were Mujahideen. They fought the Russians. They broke off. Afghanistan's so tribal, it's hard to say. It would take a senior analyst to break it down on what tribe went where and who moved where. But yes, some of the Taliban were Mujahideen. These people have been fighting for the last 40 years. You're right. They want to fight. They're very good at fighting. They want to instill their values. As you mentioned, nation building, that was our biggest, I think, fault in Afghanistan, is that we went in with the idea of nation build, not initially, but it was kind of something we felt we got stuck with. Same like Iraq after the initial invasion. We didn't really have a plan on how to deal with the fact that we controlled this country. But back to Afghanistan and nation building, when we went in and did nation building, we said, all right, here's all this money. Here's your government. You're going to set it up just like our government, and you're going to run it to the same moral standards as our government. That country is 500 years behind the West. And to come in and say from day one to day two, now you're going to start acting like the West, and I'm going to hang this carrot of money over your head, and you have to act like the West to do it. that's not going to be successful. And that's where you saw the rampant corruption and the misuse of resources, because they told us, oh, yeah, so we're going to run our government this way, but they don't want to run it that way. They didn't have any other choice. We were offering the cash.
I hate this, like I'm going to tell you my little war story is I got in trouble. I was in a carrier off of Vietnam, and I was watching the NVA, North Vietnamese Army, run south. And I saw the South Vietnamese Army run south also. And I remember sitting on the carrier in the ready room going, when you see cowardice, it's the most disgusting thing you can see. I remember asking my colonel, I said, Colonel, why is it their Vietnamese fight harder than our Vietnamese? And that's what's going on right now too, right, Ryan?
Yes, to a certain extent it is. And I understand and somewhat sympathize with the Afghan forces on why they didn't fight in certain points. Your commanders are corrupt. Your government's corrupt. You're still living in the dirt. And then your president flees the country with, the reports of millions of dollars in cash that he fled with are varying, but upwards of $100 million of cash. And he's now living a good life in Dubai. Where's the leadership, right? Your B&I triangle, where's the leadership that those Afghan soldiers are seeing that's going to make them want to fight? That's what you're missing. So I understand why most of them fled.
Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, and speaking of leadership, what's happening? I mean, is America getting its citizens and supporters out, or are they being left there? What's happening on that front?
So I don't have any firsthand knowledge about what's going on the ground right now. My assumption is that yes, all the U.S. citizens, as in U.S. personnel, are getting out and are probably out by now. And what they're likely dealing with at the moment, I would assume, is Afghan nationals that have some sort of residency status in the U.S. and or Afghan nationals that supported the U.S. And that's what I'm seeing in the open source news reporting. So now how that's going to play out, we'll actually find out here, hopefully this afternoon. Biden was given a deadline by the military of today as to whether he was going to extend the August 31st deadline or they needed to start retrograding now, which would mean cutting off those refugee flights. And that
we've cut off with Ryan. When we come back, we'll be going more into what's really happening in, I hate to say it, Afghanistan. And never forget, this whole thing with the Taliban really came to light in September 11th, 2001, I think it was. And it was by a guy named Osama bin Laden, who wasn't even from Afghanistan. He was from, I believe, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And he was a rich guy from a rich family. And they finally take him out in Pakistan someplace. So this is really not just going on in Afghanistan. The spread of what we call communism or Marxism is infiltrated the entire world, including the U.S., especially through our academic system. So ladies and gentlemen, that's why the Rich Dad Company exists, is I always keep asking the question, why don't we teach money in schools? Because they don't want us to know that. It's a way of keeping the revolutions going. So when we come back, we'll be joined again with our good friend Ryan. He's a Marine of the 11 combat deployments, and you'll find out more what's really going on the ground from real life people who have been there, not sitting in a college classroom. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. You can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anywhere, anytime on iTunes or Android and YouTube. And please leave a review whenever you listen. And all of our podcasts are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive it because we have nothing to sell. We just share information. So we strongly recommend, if you would like to learn more about this very, 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 very horrible subject, it's really horrible. It's coming out with a new book called The Capitalist Manifesto in response to the Communist Manifesto. Communism has spread all the way through the United States academically via our school system. And most people can't see it because they never read the Communist Manifesto. So as I watch what's going on in Afghanistan, it just brings back sad memories, I hate to say it, of Vietnam. So our guest today is Ryan. He's a Marine with 11 combat deployments. He got promoted into a different division. That's why we cannot disclose who he is, his picture, anything like that, because he's still basically undercover. So with that, any comments, Kim?
Yeah, well, when we left off, Ryan was talking about the deadline Bush was given, or Biden was given a deadline of August 31st. What does that deadline mean, Ryan?
So the August 31st deadline was what the administration imposed and told the Afghan government that the U.S. military would withdraw out of Afghanistan by August 31st. This is before the Kabul fall. This was months ago. The Taliban have known this. I think this contributed to their uptick in their offensive. Now, what came out in the news yesterday and this morning is that military leaders asked Biden to make a decision today, the 24th, on if we were all going to be out by the 31st. And if so, they needed to plan accordingly. And if he intended to stay longer to bring out more people, they needed to plan accordingly. And then some of our NATO allies, which I have varying opinions about, are requesting that we stay past the deadline. So we'll see what comes out of that meeting today, this afternoon.
Why did they announce a date? Why did they say we're going to be pulling out? Wouldn't that give the advantage to the Taliban?
It absolutely would. As to why, I don't know. For your listeners out there, if you want to read a good article, the New York Post has an article by Kash Patel, and he was the chief of staff under SecDef Miller, who was the acting SecDef at the end of the Trump administration. And he laid out their plan, the Trump's plan for how they were going to withdraw, and it was conditions based. I encourage people to read that article, but it kind of lays out that the Biden administration was not interested in that plan and just said, hey, we're going to have an end date and we're going to be out by that date.
So the thing it does too, like you're talking about the Northern Alliance, our allies, it just sort of cuts the guts out of them. They say, we've been fighting for all along, and you're saying adios. I mean, I just cannot believe, like when I called Biden a pussy and I got all this hate mail for that. Okay, what else would you call him? Communist? I don't know what else you would say. He just said to the enemy, come get us. We're gone. Screw you. But to our friends, he said, screw you too. So anyway, Ryan, that's my point of view. Please go on about leadership and whatever you want to talk about, because I'm so irate. I have too many bad memories coming back to me of friends I lost, guys who never recovered. And so this withdrawal, I feel right now for those guys who are Afghanis who supported us. Any comments on that?
Yeah, so to your comments about those that supported us and moving forward and feeling betrayed, that's going to ripple throughout the world. Yep. That's going to cause us issues throughout the world from years to come, because when we go into X country in Africa and try to get involved there, they're going to be less likely to trust us and work with us because of our history and what's happened here. And that's a major concern. And I see a lot of these issues really arise out of two things. And I know you take a lot of your stuff from your time in the Marine Corps. But I always look at your B&I triangle for many things, both in my investing and my work life. We have the greatest team in the world in the U.S. military. Nobody's arguing that fact. We haven't won a war since World War II with the greatest military in the world. Well, what are we missing? Here, we've been missing a mission. We've had no mission. It changes every 6 months, every year on what the mission is out there, what we're going to do, what success looks like. And then we don't have any leadership. That's our biggest problem that I see in our society as a whole, is we now have a system that almost separates those who want to be operational and those who want to be leaders. And nowadays, if you want to be a leader, you take a written test or you take a desk job and you move up that path, having never done the job itself that you're in charge of. And those people go into that for various reasons. Some honorable, some not so honorable.
We come, like I'm coming out with my book, Capitalist Manifesto, which is in contrast to the Communist Manifesto. But at the academy, we had to study what happened in World War II, because that's when it really shifted. And there was a guy named General Patton, He's one of the greatest. He was a West Pointer. He's one of the greatest generals ever. And from our point of view as a Marine, Patton was sold down the river by Eisenhower and FDR. That was our leadership. So it's politics is a nasty game, but if we had listened to Patton, we wouldn't be having this discussion now. He would just take it all the way back to Russia. But we have great fighters, great military people, but very weak leaders.
Okay, so that brings up a great point, Robert. And to Ryan, here's my question: is the administration or the politicians listening to the people on the ground, listening to the military and the people that are there? Are they taking their lead? Are they taking information? Are they using that strategically, or are they not listening to it?
So that's a good question. And Robert, I'm glad you brought up General Patton. I grew up reading everything about General Patton and love him and admire him. And even back then, he had a quote, "No good decision was ever made in a swivel chair." And that's, to your point, Kim, what's going on right now. And that's what frustrates me the most is the commanders on the ground aren't the ones that are allowed to make the decision.
Correct.
It goes back to DC. It goes back to people in chairs and buildings that are out of touch with reality on the ground that are making final decisions on a lot of these things. And I think back to my time, and I saw this change in my time in the Marine Corps. In 2006 in Fallujah, our platoon commander was on every foot patrol with us, slugging it out in the streets with us every day. Our company commander was out on the streets most days on patrol if he didn't have something else engaging. In Afghanistan in 2011, we had a great platoon commander, and he would fight and fight to come out with us, but he wouldn't be allowed to. He had to sit in the TOC, our Tactical Operations Center, and watch video feeds and listen to radios and look at satellites along with a lot of the senior staff. So as soon as guys promoted up into these senior positions, they now move away from the field, becoming further out of touch with reality. And if their time as a junior lieutenant or as a sergeant wasn't spent in combat, they didn't get that experience on the ground at any point in their career, and they continue to move up. That's what's really concerning to me.
And they're going to lead the next war when there is a next war. I'll just quickly say, my roommate on the carrier was Lieutenant Bergman. He came out Lieutenant General Bergman. And I asked him, because we would have long discussions at night in Vietnam. He says, too many of our generals are bunker bunnies. They're not on the front line, whereas Patton led from the front. And if you can understand the difference of that some generals lead from the front, but most are hiding in the bunker bunnies. That's why we're getting our asses kicked out there. And that's why when I use the word Biden is a pussy, and all people get so upset because I use politically incorrect language, that's all an effect of communism, the censorship of free speech. And that's what happens when Patton didn't stop them, just didn't take the Russians all the way back to Moscow. And so that's what's happening in America today. We just keep getting pushed back further and further and further. And in the 1930s, it infected our academic system. And that's why when I came back from Vietnam, all the peaceniks, the hippies, the love generation, they spit on me when I got back, hit me with eggs. And that's what happens when we didn't stop them, push them all the way back to Moscow, where Marxism, where Stalin and those guys created communism. And so today we face it today. So it's a very sad time, but it's also why the Rich Dad Company was founded. I'm glad you've been endorsed, the BI triangle on leadership, because that's from military. For those that haven't read, it's the second book in the Rich Dad series. It's called the Cashflow Quadrant, ESBI. E stands for employee, S stands for self-employed or small business, B stands for big business or brand, and I stands for investor. The BI triangle is what's the difference between the people on the B and the I. So Ryan, what did you take away from that B and the I triangle? Because that's military school.
Yes, what I take away from it is that you need all three to have a successful operation. And one thing I think that's also been lost in our military and in our society is the Marine Corps, when I was in, had a saying, mission accomplishment before troop welfare. And those were the only two things that mattered. Everything else came after that. First was get the mission done, no matter what the mission was. Then take care of your troops. I don't see either of those things happening right now. And I look back, the Marine Corps is well known for its leadership, and it's got its 14 leadership traits. And there's 3 of those that resonate with me: initiative, decisiveness, and unselfishness. I think those are 3 very important traits. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of leaders in our society today, especially the initiative and decisiveness, because if they do that and they fail, their career is potentially over. You're not rewarded for doing the right thing and failing. You're rewarded for standing back and doing nothing and not causing a problem. And I think that's a huge issue in our society today.
What was the third one? Initiative, decisiveness, and what was the third one, Ryan?
Unselfishness. So those are part of the Marine Corps' 14 leadership traits. They're on, the ditty for it is JJ did tie buckle. Most all Marines know that. I can't recite that anymore. But all of those are out there, and the Marine Corps is very good at its leadership. And unselfishness is a problem too. As Robert was pointing to, the bunker generals, they're only looking to move up for themselves and do what they can for themselves to move up, which means not taking any risks. It means playing the safe road all the time so that there's no international incident, so no troop gets killed. They can't get blamed for anything so that they can get promoted.
And, Ryan, it's something about Hollywood war movies and real war movies. And I just remember the first time being a pilot, the war is very abstract. We kill from the sky. But I remember this one time, this it was this Army helicopter landed aboard our carrier, because our carrier had a full operating hospital on board. And this Army gunner, probably a sergeant or a private, he took a 50 cal through the door handle in through his gut and tore him in half. And it was the first time I'd seen an American casualty. And you see this young kid, very handsome young guy. He has no guts, is blown to pieces. And we had to go in there and scrape him out. We got him down to the operating room. And then about 2 to 3 weeks later, the guy was wheeled off. He was still alive. And that's what the average person doesn't see. They sit in their television sets, the rooms, the college classrooms, and they criticize, people like you and me who have actually seen it. Or as I love what Nicholson said, all this Hollywood, he says, you want the truth. You can't handle the truth. I think that's really what's wrong with America today, because we'd rather just pretend that if you play Reddit and Robin Hood and all that stuff, your life will be fine. Meanwhile, we're getting our asses kicked everywhere. Final words, Ryan.
Yes, Robert, I absolutely agree with you on that. And that is a societal problem that we have. Every time I return home from overseas, I get the feeling that more and more Americans are out of touch with the reality of the world. And I think that's from having it too good for too long. I don't know what the fix is. We may see the fix coming with, some impending economic issues in our country, and we continue down those wrong roads, and we're going to see a lot of hardship in this country. Not that I want to see that, but maybe some of that's needed for people to wake up a little bit about the way the world is actually run.
I think that's a great point. I think that is a great point. Hopefully I'll get to the point where people will start waking up. I just want to end my comment with you, Ryan, is when you said, there was no mission. I mean, how do you rally people together and get them to go beyond where they have to go if there's no mission? If they don't know why they're there? What were they fighting for in their minds? What was, did they have their own mission? I don't know how you operate without a strong mission, especially in a war situation.
Yes, Kim, that's exactly it. Back to my time there as an infantry Marine in 2011, we were pushing out and taking ground. As we were about to rotate out in 2012, we were demilling and pulling down our bases, and we're saying that we're pulling out of Afghanistan. So what has the mission been for all those troops that have gone in there since 2012? What have they been told, their mission is as numbers dwindle and we're leaving and all this political rhetoric about what we're going to do there? It's very hard on those young troops out there on understanding what their actual mission is.
That's, to me, it's one thing to die, but the other thing is, Kim has seen my classmates who never came back. Like Robbie, I went to elementary school. He was an A6 pilot for the Marine Corps. They don't come back. But the guys, a lot of them do come back, either severely physically wounded or emotionally wounded. And I think that's a real tragedy. And now I'm really concerned about the Afghanis who actually did support us. They're going to get killed now. And, my company, when I was in Hawaii, remember, Kim, we had all those Vietnamese boat people working for us. So the mission goes on as entrepreneurs. But I had about 35 Vietnamese people working for us, and they were the best of people. They worked so hard. They didn't complain. They didn't ask for time off. They were just happy to be in Hawaii working. And I think that's what's missing. We've gotten really too soft. For me, it's a very sad time, because we lost a lot, and we're going to continue to lose now. And anyway, so Ryan, I want to thank you very much. I value and trust you as a friend. And thank you for your insights, and keep up the good fight.
Thank you both. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate it a lot.
Semper Fi, man.
Semper Fi.
So when we come back with a final wrap up on this program, I'm kind of emotional. I get sad about it because you have a lot. We lost a lot, and we're losing a lot more. So I come back with a final wrap up what you and I can do to fight back. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Good news and bad news about money. I want to thank our special guest, Ryan. He's been a good friend, fellow Marine. 11 combat deployments into that part of the world. And I got a little upset about it because this is like deja vu all over again. I remember when we had to evacuate. I didn't evacuate, but we knew we lost the war. As I got in trouble saying to my commanding officer, I said, how come their Vietnamese fight harder than our Vietnamese? Like I said, when the NVA, North Vietnamese Army, rolled south, so did the South Vietnamese Army. they were running ahead of the NVA. And that's why, for a chance to take a look at the Taliban's pictures right now. You can see it in their eyes. They want to win. And as Ryan said, all the Taliban, all the Afghani army was an employment agency. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this up, but the mission goes on. When I came back from Vietnam and we lost, there was a thing called the Vietnamese boat people, and they escaped any way they could. And Kim remembers the mission went on as entrepreneurs. Like my little company, with about 35 Vietnamese boat people working for us. So our job was to keep the fight on via entrepreneurship. So Kim, any comments you want to talk about when you met those people?
Well, they were extremely hardworking people. And I didn't have any personal relationships with any of them, but I just remember coming in, I'd walk in and they are just busy working, sewing. And they had a lot of respect for you, Robert. I know that. So, yeah. I thought it was actually quite amazing that you went to Vietnam and then you come back and now you're hiring all these Vietnamese people. That was pretty cool.
Like the three owners of the Rich Dad Company, one was Army, my brother was Air Force, and I was Marines.
You mean the Rippers? Rippers,
yeah, the Ripper Company. And it was one of the most important jobs we have was to provide jobs for them. So anyway, that's the thing I'd like to say is that it really disturbs me that when America's gotten very weak in the guts. They have no guts. They're almost as bad as the ghost armies of the Iraqi army. But with that said, anyway, thank you for listening to Rich Dad. The way we fight back is the Capitalist Manifesto, which contrary to the Communist Manifesto, is Kim and I started the Rich Dad Company with the Cashflow board game. The way, when my new book comes out called The Capitalist Manifesto, not Communist Manifesto, is what Kim and I did back in the 80s, was we created the board games because the way you fight communism, which most school teachers, I would say 20% of school teachers today are Marxists but don't know it because they never read the Communist Manifesto, much less anything else. So 20% of all school teachers today are Marxists. There's a new book called The Madness of Crowds. It talks about when a survey done, 20% of the school teachers do not realize, but they have Marxist beliefs. So the way Kim and I fought back in, what's that, 96 now, seems like years ago, we created the Cashflow board game to teach capitalism. We wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad to fight capitalism, fight for capitalism. We wrote Cashflow Quadrant, which Ryan talks about the BI triangle. That's military leadership. Mission, leader, team. And that's how the Rich Dad Company operates today. We're a small entrepreneurial company, but we're fighting against Marxism taught in our schools, because that's why there's no financial education in schools. And every time I tell a school teacher they think like Marx, they get very upset. I said, well, did you read the Communist Manifesto? They go, no, but I have a college degree. I said, that's the problem. So with that said, now you know what the Rich Dad Company stands for. The Capitalist Manifesto comes out November 10th, the Marine Corps birthday. And I'll be in Miami speaking to the Marines, the Marine Detachment in Miami, Florida. And I will be in our place in South Carolina speaking to the Marines of South Carolina. But it's time we fight back. And the way we fight back is with education, not guns. We fight back by teaching capitalism, not that communism taught in our schools. Final words, Kim.
Well, I think Ryan summed it up really, really well, is what we need. And what we teach is we teach people to be free, but what we need is leadership. We need people to step up. We need people to do what needs to be done regardless of the consequences. And we have no leadership in this country. We have very little leadership in the world. So I think in terms of a solution, the question is, what can you do? What can you stand up for? What can you do?
And we have thousands of cash flow clubs which teach capitalism throughout the world. They're small little clubs. Hopefully they'll stay submerged so they don't get shut down by the woke crowd and the cancel culture and the school teachers of the area. Because as Kim knows, it was the teachers that have attacked us the hardest.
They have. And yes, our cash flow clubs, we've got over 2,000 that have registered at the Rich Dad website, and it's great. We're going to be supporting them more and more with education and resources and all sorts of things, because that's how we spread our mission, is through the cash flow clubs.
And I didn't prompt Ryan on this, but the reason the BI triangle is so important is when you look at ES, B, and the I and the I side is where we still have our freedoms. Mm-hmm. E's and S's have lost their freedoms. Like today, you get fired if you don't get a vaccine shot, which doesn't work, but you'll still get fired. So we're losing our freedoms on the E and the S side. If you want freedoms, it's on the B and the I side. So that's why we have cash flow clubs. So people have no idea what I'm talking about. Read the book number 2 in the Capitalist Manifesto. It's called the Cash Flow Quadrant. So before we end the program, I thought we'd best have our executive producer here who keeps the whole program going. Sarah, what's your final thoughts on this program?
Well, I can't help but watch the news or watch videos coming out of what's happening. And I saw a video where the leader of the Taliban is threatening Biden basically, or challenging him and saying, if you don't get your people out by August 31st, they're ours. And I don't understand the delay. Why is it a question? Why aren't we there taking everybody out that we can?
Because Biden's a pussy. And that's what I said, and I got hell for that.
I guess it just goes back to, what you two were talking about, is just the lack of leadership.
He's not a Marine.
I mean, but it's a great point, Sarah.
Look at John Hunter. That man is a con man. I mean, he's up there. He's a bag man collecting cash for his family. But nobody says anything because we're so afraid to speak out now. That's what upsets me. Like I said, that first guy I saw face to face with his guts blown out, I'd seen Viet Cong dead, but I never saw my first American soldier, young guy, blown to shreds. I mean, thank God he lived. And then we got spit on by those hippies, those flower children, peaceniks. That was communism invading America. That's why I hold it, and I catch hell for that.
And I think too, to your point, Sarah, is as Ryan said, there are people in swivel chairs making decisions. And to Robert's point, they haven't been to war. They don't know what it is. And they are so out of touch. And I did ask Ryan before this program, I asked him, was this done on purpose? Are they doing this on purpose for some crazy reason? And he said, in his opinion, it is just pure incompetence. It's incompetence, people that don't understand what's happening on the streets, and they're trying to make decisions and solutions from their white ivory towers.
I agree. Because what happened for me in Vietnam is we'd be firing, we'd catch the Viet Cong or NVA, North Vietnamese Army, out in the open. And before we could shoot, I had to go up and say, desk control, desk. I don't know who they were, but they were back in Washington, D.C. I said, fire mission. And they say, wait one. And meanwhile, we're taking fire like crazy. We have to wait for permission to shoot. And those are the guys who are making the decisions. And until you've been there, I don't think you have any idea what that feels like. American troops are getting killed. They're kicking the crap out of us. They're firing back at us. I have to radio to Washington and say, fire mission, wait one. And that's why, Kim knows my friend, General Bergman, 3-star. He calls them bunker bunnies. Bunker bunnies. And President Biden won the election hiding in his basement. Mm-hmm. If that doesn't tell you something, and why I call Biden a pussy, you haven't been to either Afghanistan or to Vietnam, and you're probably a college graduate who's never been into the real world. So, Sarah, final words.
Final words. Great show. I know our audience is probably thinking this is nothing like I've ever heard, but I think this is one of the most important shows we've done. And it really talks about the importance of leadership, whether in business, running a country, being a participant in the world, that leadership is important.
Yep. And entrepreneurship is the way out, not going to school and getting a job working for the government, which 99% of the people want to do because that's what school teachers do. Anyway, thanks for listening to the Rich Dad Radio program.
Thôi mong chờ vậy sao bật khóc trong ngu ngơ vẫn thế đây bao lâu nay em không hay chỉ một mình anh ngồi khóc nước mắt đây riêng nơi đây em không hay sự thật là anh nhớ em người giờ đã xa lời hẹn ước đâu rồi nước mắt đây rơi biết bao lâu thì khô vẫn thế đây bao đêm say em không hay từng giọt buồn sao mặn đắng nhưng lúc ấy anh loay hoay trong cơn say lại nhầm rằng em ở đây người giờ đổi thay tình mình vẫn đong đầy thế mới biết anh vẫn yêu em thì sao tìm quên chốn xưa ngày ta quen